Hi, everyone. I am back talking about all things OCD and anxiety. Thank you for joining me. And I'm also sharing a new perspective I've had on how the mind works, how we've been conditioned to believe everything that we think over time, and how this understanding has really led to a lot of peace of mind for me and a lot of freedom. So I share these videos in the hopes that they will help some of you out there who are suffering from anxiety or OCD or know somebody who is. So for my third video, I'm sharing my own story so as to give some context as to how I've seen change over my life and things that have really helped me. So, as a child, like probably many people, I had a lot of tics and um, compulsions, things I had to do. I had a habit of looking up at the sun and blinking and having to touch certain surfaces a certain number of times, and mirrors and edges of walls, things I just felt compelled to do. I didn't know why. And then over time, I started to get thoughts that would pop into my head of things that I didn't understand. And these words that were foreign to me, but that would stay. And I would just repeat them over and over and over again. And I didn't really understand why I was doing it. It just seemed like a scary word, and it just stuck with me. So these were bothersome things. And my family and friends had always said, well, you're just an overthinker and you analyze a lot. You have a very active mind. And I just kind of thought, okay, well, that's who I am. And over time, I've shared before in past videos about the year before I went to college. I had what I call my big OCD episode when I was moving across country, and I had a very irrational thought pop into my head about self-harm, and it was very troubling and scary, and it had nothing to do with who I was or what I actually wanted to do. I had never had any thought like that about wanting to do anything. I was always a very happy person. So this was so opposite anything I had felt about myself or anything I had ever considered. So it was offensive. And I think that's true for most people that have intrusive thoughts, is that these thoughts are so offensive to who we are as people that we just have to push them away. And we're right to feel that. They are not us. So just keep that in mind. And so that was very troubling. I had a lot of depression and anxiety my freshman year. I couldn't get rid of this thought. I felt very superficial in my relationships. I couldn't connect deeply with people. I was so preoccupied in my mind that I really was not in the present moment. So my freshman year is kind of a blur to me. And after that, I was able to get diagnosed and was prescribed Prozac by a psychiatrist. Prozac was very new on the market then, and it was effective for me, and it did help me a lot with taming those intrusive thoughts. At the same time, I still had this lasting sense of something not being right, just this sense of unease, and that I wasn't free of whatever this was that had been plaguing me. Even though that particular thought was gone, I still felt insecure and unstable, and still not really connected to people, and my relationships still did not feel very deep. Things still felt superficial to me. Over time, I continued to read all I could about OCD. It was at a time when there wasn't a lot available, but as books continued to come out and more people started writing about it, I would read everything I could. And I also continued to see professionals. I would see counselors, and I'd see psychologists, I would see psychiatrists, many different kinds. And some didn't know anything about OCD, and some did know a lot about OCD. Eventually, I found one that was very, very helpful with OCD. And at the same time, the conversations were always seen in the lens of OCD. Everything was always about kind of the OCD thought and that OCD reaction, and it seemed like, well, this was just a container over here. And again, while those were all very helpful in different ways, I think it's when I started to look beyond just the OCD conversation to a bigger understanding and a bigger look at all that's involved in who we are, the spiritual, the mental, the physical, And I found some really great resources that started to look at how all of these things are connected to contribute to our well-being, and also how our behaviors are in part a product of physiological stress responses in the body. And we store these at a very early age, and I had never looked at the body, and I had never looked at the kind of these trauma in the body. I can't remember what it is. The body keeps score. What happens in the physical realm as well, and really paying attention to that, looking at that, not just the thoughts, but how it's all interconnected. And especially looking at core beliefs and thought patterns in our mind that come with, our conditioning. And so this really started to open my mind to kind of how things work in general. And that was very helpful to me. And I started to experience some freedom around that. And it went even further when I was introduced to an understanding of how we've all innocently believed these stories that our minds have created over time, all to keep us safe. And understanding the universality of that we all have these minds that are machines that are trying to keep us safe. We all have them. And I think a trap that we all get stuck in, especially people that have anxious thoughts or OCD thoughts, is that we believe these thoughts to be meaningful. We believe them to be personal, and we don't think we should be having them. Those three things are very key. I think they're very true, especially if the thoughts are scary and we don't understand them. But they say everything. If we believe that our thoughts are personal, they're meaningful, and that they shouldn't be happening, we will do everything we can to get rid of them. And that's where we fall into trouble, because that pushing away and fighting and resisting, as many people know, is what keeps them. So I've really been able to see this in a very deep way. And I understood how I was believing my thoughts and thought they meant something about me, and that I was the only one who was experiencing this. And these were bad thoughts. And that's not true. And when I realized that that wasn't true, and this was just universally what was happening to people, that it really gave me great sense of relief. And we've innocently been believing all these thoughts, but these thoughts aren't who we are at all. They have nothing to do with us. And it's fascinating when you start to get a look at this and an understanding of this, that we are not those thoughts. Those are creations. And it's our deeper wisdom and resilience, our true nature, the part that we don't see. That's really who we are. And there's a lot more that can be discussed about the nature of how thoughts are changing all the time, and looking at the part of us that doesn't ever change and seeing the difference between those two. All these things have given me such peace of mind, and they've really quieted the chatter in my head. Because when there's nothing to grab onto, when these thoughts are not having the power that they once did, look at me, you've got to hold on to me, you've got to pay attention to me, I'm going to keep you safe, I'm going to tell you what you need to do, what you need to be afraid of. When it no longer holds your attention, those start to drop away. There's just nothing keeping them alive. That fire's not there. So these are some of the biggest takeaways, and I'll leave you just with a few more ways that I've seen changes in my life. Some of the beliefs that I really held strongly to, that I don't hold on to anymore, was I really wanted to understand at one point what was anxiety and what was OCD and which thought was which, and maybe it was neither, but I wanted to categorize all my thoughts. What was what symptoms were what condition, what was my condition. I don't think that anymore. I am not tied to any of that. And that is incredibly freeing. Another thought I used to have was I wanted to get back to the way I was before I had my OCD episode. I talk about that in the second episode. And I don't feel that way anymore. I don't think there's a before and after. There's just life, moment to moment living us. And that's been a huge change in how I used to see things. And the third thing I've really experienced is I used to feel lost in myself. I was searching, I was trying to figure things out. I was just in my head and in analyzing and wondering. I wasn't present. How could I be? And now I feel more grounded. I feel more here. I feel that I can more easily engage in conversations. And it's not through trying, it's not through listening better or trying to do any sort of technique. No, it's just by having a greater understanding of how life really works. So, those are some of my big takeaways. And I am happy to respond to any comments or anything that you make. So, please send me your questions or your comments, and I hope that you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next time.